Most fans remember Keith Whitley as the voice that could make even the hardest hearts feel something real. His songs were raw, his voice unforgettable, and his rise in the country music scene was meteoric. But behind those powerful ballads and soulful lyrics, Keith carried a dark weight, a burden few people knew about while he was alive. In May of 1989, at the young age of 34, Whitley was found dead in his home. Fans were shocked, the country music world was devastated, and questions swirled. What happened to this bright star? How could a man who had seemingly everything, a flourishing career, a wife who adored him, and an undeniable talent, end up like this? As details emerged, so did the heartbreaking reality of Keith's final days. Keith's story isn't just one of fame and fortune. It's also a story of inner demons, secret struggles, and the often hidden battles that fame can intensify rather than erase. His last days hold a mystery that has only deepened with time, and each piece of this tragic puzzle paints a picture that's both inspiring and haunting. From the very beginning, Keith Whitley was destined to make waves in country music. Born in Kentucky, a place where bluegrass and country sounds fill the air, Keith's journey into music felt like it was written in his DNA. Even as a young boy, people around him noticed his incredible talent. By the time he was a teenager, he was performing in local competitions, captivating audiences with a voice that seemed far too mature for his age. Keith's talent caught the attention of legendary bluegrass musician Ralph Stanley, who invited him to join his band, the Clinch Mountain Boys. This was a rare opportunity, especially for someone as young as Keith, and it marked the beginning of his journey in the spotlight. Touring with Stanley's band, he didn't just learn about music, he lived it. Keith was thrown into the world of long nights, crowded bars, and the endless rhythm of life on the road. And while this exposure honed his skills, it also introduced him to a different kind of temptation: alcohol. Keith's journey wasn't without bumps. Alongside fame and applause came a darker side, a struggle that would follow him for the rest of his life. Alcohol became both an escape and a crutch. For a young man under immense pressure to keep performing, to keep delivering those heartfelt ballads, alcohol seemed like a way to cope. Friends and fellow musicians noticed his growing dependency, but in an industry where late nights and heavy drinking were common, it didn't raise alarm bells at first. For Keith, it was just a way to get through the endless tours and demanding schedules. Eventually, Keith set out on a solo career, and Nashville took notice. His debut album, A Hard Act to Follow, showed the world what he was capable of. But it was his second album, LA to Miami, that truly marked his breakthrough. Songs like Miami, Miami, and 10 Feet Away skyrocketed him to fame, cementing his status as one of country music's rising stars. Keith had finally found the recognition he'd worked so hard for. The crowds adored him, and the industry embraced him. He was on the path to becoming one of the all-time greats. Yet, even as his star rose, Keith couldn't shake the personal demons that lingered just beneath the surface. Behind every performance, every chart-topping hit, was a man struggling with his own pain. While fans saw a young star with a promising future, Keith was beginning to feel the cracks. Alcohol was no longer just a social indulgence. It was becoming something he couldn't escape, something that followed him through every success and every setback. Keith Whitley's rise to fame was swift, but fame can be a double-edged sword. Beneath the glittering success and adoration, Keith was locked in a battle few people understood. Alcohol had become a constant companion, a quiet demon that lurked behind every stage appearance and recording session. But it wasn't just his career that felt the strain. Keith's personal life was deeply affected as well. At the heart of his personal world was his wife, Lori Morgan, a fellow country singer who loved him deeply. The two had a connection that was undeniable, a romance that fans adored and that looked picture perfect from the outside. Together, they were Nashville royalty, embodying the kind of love story that fans could only dream about. But behind closed doors, it was often a different story. Keith's struggles with alcohol created cracks in their relationship, bringing heartbreak and tension into a marriage that was supposed to be a sanctuary from the pressures of fame. Lori tried everything to support Keith, standing by him as he attempted to quit drinking. There were days when things looked hopeful, when he seemed to be making progress. But then came the inevitable setbacks, moments when the pull of alcohol was just too strong, when the weight of his personal battles pushed him back into old habits. Lori often found herself caught in an emotional tug-of-war. fighting to keep their marriage intact while watching the man she loved slip deeper into addiction. Those close to Keith could see that his struggle with alcohol was more than just a bad habit. It was a deeply rooted battle, one that he fought both openly and in private. Some friends saw him as a man haunted by a darkness he couldn't escape, an artist whose sensitivity made him especially vulnerable. For Keith, alcohol became a way to numb that sensitivity, to quiet the constant noise of his own mind. He wasn't just a country singer. He was a poet, a man who felt everything deeply, and that depth of feeling sometimes became overwhelming. Keith's battles didn't go unnoticed by his fans either. He wasn't one to hide his troubles, and there was a rawness to his music that spoke to those who had their own struggles. Fans connected with his songs on a profound level, hearing in his voice a pain that felt as real as their own. But the very quality that drew people to Keith's music, the honesty, the vulnerability, was also the thing that seemed to hurt him the most. His art was a reflection of his soul, and every note he sang was like an open wound, leaving him emotionally drained. As Keith continued to climb the charts, his internal struggles grew. He was caught in a vicious cycle. The more successful he became, the more he felt the need to numb himself, and the deeper his addiction took root. It was a burden that few people around him truly understood, a struggle that took a toll on his relationships, his mental health, and his will to keep going. In the weeks before Keith Whitley's tragic death, those closest to him sensed that something was different. There was a restlessness in Keith, a sense that he was fighting harder than ever against his inner demons. Lori Morgan and a few close friends were aware that he had been struggling with his sobriety. Although Keith had gone through periods of sobriety before, this time, the battle seemed more intense, and there were signs that his pain was reaching a breaking point. Despite his struggles, Keith maintained a busy schedule, trying to stay focused on his career. He was working on new music, and fans could feel the excitement building for his next album. But behind the scenes, Keith was growing more isolated. He spent long hours alone, withdrawing from those who cared about him the most. Friends would later recall that he seemed distant, as if he were somewhere else, lost in a place that no one could reach. In those final days, Lori noticed that Keith's mood shifted constantly. One moment, he was upbeat, talking about plans for the future. The next, he seemed clouded by a sadness that he couldn't shake. Lori tried her best to keep his spirits up, to be his anchor in the storm. But Keith's battle was internal, and it was one he often fought alone, hiding his true feelings from even those closest to him. To many, it seemed like he was trying to carry the weight of his troubles on his own, a burden that became too heavy over time. The night before his death, Keith stayed up late, drinking alone. Friends who had spoken to him earlier in the day recalled that he had seemed off, but no one imagined how serious his state truly was. Even Lori, who had been through countless highs and lows with him, couldn't have foreseen what was coming. She had grown used to Keith's unpredictable moods, trusting that he would bounce back as he had in the past. But this time, the darkness seemed deeper, more consuming. On the morning of May 9, 1989, Lori left the house early for an appointment. She planned to return shortly, assuming that Keith would still be sleeping when she got back. But when she returned, she found Keith lying in bed, unresponsive. The suddenness of it all was overwhelming. Keith, the man she had shared her life with, was gone in an instant. The reality of his passing hit her like a tidal wave, an unfathomable shock that left her grasping for answers. Keith's death would send shockwaves through the country music world and devastate his fans, who mourned the loss of a true talent taken too soon. The mystery and heartbreak of his final days left an indelible mark, leaving friends, family, and fans to wonder, could anything have changed his fate? As they grappled with his passing, the question of what if would linger, haunting those who loved him for years to come. The morning of May 9, 1989, began as any other day for Lori Morgan. She left home early for a routine appointment, assuming that Keith, who had stayed up late the previous night, would still be sleeping when she returned. But when she walked back into their house later that morning, she felt an immediate sense of unease. The house was too quiet, and Keith didn't respond to her calls. As she made her way to the bedroom, a wave of dread washed over her. Keith was lying in bed, unmoving. Lori's heart sank as she approached him, the realization dawning painfully slow, yet all at once. Keith was gone. In that moment, her worst fears were confirmed. The man she had loved, the one she had fought to save from his demons, had slipped away. The shock was paralyzing. Lori's mind raced as she tried to process the scene in front of her, struggling to comprehend that Keith, the love of her life, was no longer there. News of his sudden passing spread quickly, and those closest to Keith found themselves grappling with an overwhelming sense of loss. It was as though a bright light had been abruptly extinguished, leaving a void that no one knew how to fill. Fans and fellow musicians were stunned by the news. Many in the industry were aware of Keith's struggles, but few had imagined that his life would end so suddenly. The country music community fell into collective mourning, shocked by the loss of a talent so unique, so raw, and so irreplaceable. Keith had poured his soul into his music, and fans felt as though they'd lost not just a musician, but a part of themselves. As the days passed, details began to emerge about the likely cause of his death. The official report concluded that Keith had died from alcohol poisoning, a tragic culmination of years of battling addiction. To those who knew him, it was both heartbreaking and haunting. Friends and family were left to wonder if there had been anything they could have done differently. Some questioned if they had missed signs in Keith's behavior, subtle cries for help that they hadn't recognized. Lori was left with her own grief and a profound sense of guilt. She had stood by Keith through his darkest moments, hoping he would one day conquer his demons. But now, she was left with only memories and an aching what if that would haunt her for years. She questioned every moment leading up to that fateful morning, wondering if there had been something, anything, she could have done to save him. Keith's death became a cautionary tale within the music industry, a sobering reminder of the toll that fame and inner battles can take. He had achieved so much in his short life, leaving behind a legacy filled with songs that were both beautiful and haunting, each one a piece of his soul. His passing wasn't just a loss for his loved ones, but a heartbreak felt deeply by fans and musicians alike. A tragic end that underscored the fragility of even the brightest stars. In the wake of Keith Whitley's sudden death, family, friends, and fans struggled to make sense of it all. The official cause of death, alcohol poisoning, left a bitter taste and raised questions that still linger. Keith's blood alcohol level was reportedly 47, more than 5 times the legal limit. A staggering number that painted a tragic picture of his final hours. For those close to him, the numbers only highlighted the relentless hold that addiction had on Keith, a battle he had fought fiercely, but ultimately could not win. As the details emerged, people close to Keith began to piece together what may have led to that fateful morning. His struggle with alcohol was no secret, but the intensity of his dependence was something that even those nearest to him couldn't fully grasp. Friends remembered seeing flashes of the old Keith, moments when he seemed to find joy again, laughing and talking about future plans. But there were also times when a deeper sadness took over, a melancholy that seemed to seep into his very being. It was as if two versions of Keith existed, the charismatic performer who lit up a room and the haunted soul fighting to keep it all together. Some wondered if Keith's passing was a slow unraveling of his inner struggles rather than a sudden, shocking event. While his death was officially ruled an accident, the lack of clarity around those final hours only fueled speculation. People questioned whether it was simply a night of excessive drinking or a reflection of something more profound, a final surrender to a battle he felt he could never win. The whispers and theories grew, and while some found peace in the official report, others couldn't shake the feeling that more lay beneath the surface. For Lori Morgan, the questions were almost too much to bear. She had been Keith's biggest supporter, constantly hoping that one day he'd overcome his struggles. She believed in him, even when others doubted. After his passing, she found herself replaying his final days, analyzing every conversation, every moment, looking for signs she might have missed. The heartbreak of losing him was compounded by the haunting what-ifs that filled her mind. Could she have done something differently? Was there a way to save him? These questions, forever unanswered, became a heavy burden she would carry. The country music community was equally devastated, but Keith's passing served as a somber warning to others in the industry. His death exposed the pressures and isolation that fame can bring, especially for artists who feel things deeply. Keith's story became a reminder that behind every great talent can be a person fighting battles no one else sees. Keith Whitley's tragic end left behind more than just a gap in country music. It left a lingering mystery, an ache in the hearts of those who loved him, and a haunting reminder of the struggles hidden behind fame's bright lights. His legacy lived on in his music, but his death cast a shadow that would stay with fans and loved ones for years to come. After Keith Whitley's passing, his influence on country music only grew. While his life ended too soon, the mark he left behind was undeniable. Keith's voice, filled with raw emotion and depth, became a benchmark for authenticity in the genre. Artists and fans alike were drawn not only to his skill, but to the vulnerability he showed through his music, a rare quality that made every song feel deeply personal. To this day, he remains an icon for those who value heartfelt storytelling over polished perfection. The impact of his music, especially songs like When You Say Nothing at All and Don't Close Your Eyes, went beyond mere chart success. These songs spoke to universal emotions and experiences, resonating with people who felt a connection to the honesty in Keith's voice. As years passed, his music only gained more reverence, with his ballads often considered timeless expressions of love, heartache, and resilience. New generations of country artists grew up listening to him, drawing inspiration from his ability to convey profound emotion with seemingly effortless grace. Keith's influence reached beyond his recorded songs. It shaped the very fabric of country music. Musicians began to view their work differently, seeing vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. He showed that true artistry meant showing parts of yourself that others might keep hidden. In doing so, Keith helped shape the future of country music, paving the way for a new kind of artist, one who didn't just sing, but told their own story with every note. Today, his legacy lives on in ways that extend beyond his own recordings. Numerous artists have paid tribute to him, covering his songs and citing him as a major influence. His ability to transform personal pain into something beautiful has inspired countless musicians to embrace authenticity, ensuring that his spirit remains a guiding light within the genre. His music has become a staple at concerts, with modern artists often dedicating performances to Keith as a reminder of the power of honesty in storytelling. In his hometown and across the country, fans and fellow musicians continue to honor him. Every year, country music enthusiasts gather to celebrate his work, keeping his memory alive through events, tributes, and commemorations that ensure his contributions are never forgotten. Keith's name has become synonymous with soulful authenticity, an artist who left behind a legacy of emotional integrity and timeless music. Ultimately, Keith Whitley's legacy isn't defined by the tragic end, but by the beauty he brought to the world. His life reminds us that true artistry lies in embracing one's own humanity, flaws and all. Keith's voice still echoes in country music's halls, a testament to a man who gave everything to his art and left behind a legacy that resonates just as deeply today as it did when he first graced the stage. Keith Whitley's story is both a poignant reminder of the struggles many face and an enduring testament to the power of genuine artistry. Decades after his passing, his influence in country music remains profound, a guiding force for new generations of musicians who see him not just as a performer, but as a symbol of honesty and depth in an often polished industry. Each song he recorded resonates with a rawness that makes listeners feel they truly knew him, even if only through his music. In life, Keith's battle with his inner demons was one that others didn't fully understand. Yet in death, he left behind valuable lessons that continue to touch fans, friends, and fellow artists alike. His music speaks not just of love and loss, but of the human experience in its most vulnerable form. Young artists look to him as an inspiration, finding courage to reveal their true selves on stage and through their lyrics, just as Keith did with every performance. Beyond the music industry, Keith's story has grown into a message about the importance of mental and emotional well-being, a reminder that success and personal struggles often walk side by side. Though fans and loved ones can't help but wonder what more he could have achieved, they hold tightly to the songs and memories he left behind. Keith Whitley may have left this world too soon, but his spirit endures in every note, inspiring future artists and moving hearts across generations. His legacy is one of beauty, courage, and the enduring power of a voice that, even after all these years, still feels like it's singing just for you.